Okay. Forms of government, section 2. Classifying governments. We're going to play Aristotle and classify governments, and we're going to go over some qualifications one must have in order to classify governments. So first and foremost, every government, past and present, has been unique. No two governments have been exactly alike. Every regime is different. Every presidency is different. Every year of a presidency is different. You cannot compare one to the other being exactly like, because that cannot happen. Each human is different and have different wants and needs, etc. There are 3 important classifications of government. So we use these 3 points to classify governments. They are the most bare basics when classifying. First, who can participate in the governing process? Is anybody available? Is it only a certain elite, or is it one person, or is it by birth, etc.? Who can participate? Next, the geographic distribution of governmental power within the state. How is power being distributed? Is it all in one location, maybe in a capital, or is it spread out kind of like a... Then third, we have the relationship between the legislative and the executive branches of government. How do they interact? Is one more powerful than the other? Are they separate but equal? How do they interact with one another? Who can participate? So we're going to look first at democracy. You have this. The democracy states that the supreme political authority is within the people. The people are the ones making the ultimate decisions. Now, there are 2 types of democracy: indirect and direct. Direct is a pure form of democracy. The will of the people is directly translated into public policy or law. You can only work with small communities. We see this actually in California. Every election that we vote on for propositions is actually a form of direct democracy, because the majority's will is put into law. If the proposition passes, it goes directly into law. If it does not, obviously it is not put into law. But the people of California vote on those propositions and decide if it will become a law or not. But again, most of these work in small communities, not large ones. For example, the United States does not have a national proposition unless we're talking about an amendment to the Constitution. And we'll get into that procedure later on in the year. Indirect or representative form is where people are chosen to represent the masses, a government of popular consent. We have an indirect democracy in the sense that we elect people to our state legislatures and we elect people to our national legislature, which is Congress. We have indirect and direct, and we see those interacting in different ways. Then we have the other side, the flip side of democracy. We have dictatorship. Zero government accountability. It does not answer to anybody, nor should they have to. It's also the oldest and most common form of government, meaning that it is easy for one ruler or monarch or whoever to become power hungry or to become corrupt and can turn themselves into a dictator rather than a monarch or something else to that nature. There are 2 major types. There's an autocracy or oligarchy. Okay? An autocracy is where a single person or individual holds unlimited political power, which would be seen as a monarch or a dictatorship. We'll go into autocracies further when we look at authoritarian versus totalitarian. Just hold on for that for a moment, but know that autocracies can be broken down even further. And we also have an oligarchy, which is a government in which a small group of people, most of all, have government decisions and they usually share it. Russia would be a good example of this. You have Vladimir Putin making decisions, but you also have a prime minister and even a legislative body helping run the Russian Federation. Now, for long-lasting democracies, the United States, 1776 to the present. We use 1776 because that's when we declared our independence, but we didn't really have a strong sovereign government until 1789. But for now, we'll use 1776 as our date. We do have the longest standing democracy. We've lasted the longest comparatively to other democracies. Rome, for example, did fall and did crumble, and some people are worried that we may crumble in the future. We're also considered to be a democratic republic rather than a democracy. If someone refers to us as a democracy, you can kindly tell them that no, we are actually a democratic republic. And if you want to be even more specific, we are a constitutionally limited democratic republic. That is our official title. And we also have a three-branch government of three different types. We have legislative, which makes the laws; executive, which executes or enforces them; and judicial, which makes sure that these laws are passed by the other two branches are constitutional. And within those three branches, we have checks and balances. Each of them have different responsibilities and can limit or control another based on types of action. And we will get into that later. This link right here, if you end up clicking on it or typing it in, will show you different levels of democracies in the world and which governments are classified as democracies and which are not. Now, democracies themselves, these are just some basic definitions. Democracy is a system of rule which permits citizens to play a significant part in the governmental process, usually through the election of key public officials. Simply saying people get to have a say in the election. Okay. Then we have the constitutional government, where a system of rule in which formal and effective limits are placed on the powers of the government, meaning the government is restrained by a constitution. Depending on, it does not matter what form of government, it could be a legislative run government, it could be a dictatorship, it could be whatever it may be, but if it has a constitution limiting a certain power of the government, then it would be considered a constitutional government. And finally, we have republic, a system of which government in which the populace selects representatives who play a significant role in government decision making. It's basically where we elect other people to make decisions on our behalf. And the United States has all three of these forms working together cohesively to be efficient in governing. Now, dictatorships. An authoritarian is a system of rule in which the government recognizes no formal limits, but may nevertheless be restrained by the power of other social institutions. A primary example would be South America. Dictators would often adhere or listen to the Roman Catholic Church or give kickbacks to the Roman Catholic Church in order to have the populace listen to them. Roman Catholicism is very popular in South America, and the Pope is seen as almost like God. Okay, and so in the system, the authoritarian ruler would often consult or get backing from the Roman Catholic Church in order to continue ruling and make people much more pliable, which is one person that has no formal limits on its power and seeks to absorb or eliminate other social institutions that might challenge it. So totalitarian rulers have total and absolute power. They will not listen to religion. They will not listen to any other entity. They alone make the decisions, and they're completely content with wiping out whoever challenges them. We have modern era, necessarily know these, but it is useful to know for the future. We have fascist Italy from 1922 to 1943, Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945. It's important to remember that Nazi Party was actually elected to office before they assumed control. The people chose them, whether we agree with their choice or not. They did elect those party members into their legislature. But once they were in power, the Nazi Party passed laws to give Chancellor Hitler unlimited power, signaling a shift from a democratic system to a dictatorship of sorts. And there's good old Hitler. The USSR from 1917 to 1990. They have a form of communism, not pure communism, but a form of it. Arguably, Russia is returning to its old ways. You see Vladimir Putin constantly switching the economy over to government regulated, government promoted, etc. And he still assumes control and controls much of the economic development. Then you have the People's Republic of China, 1949 to the present. China has a communist government, but a capitalist economic system. They have a current military, technological, and resource buildup. As the population grows, they try to create as much as possible. Tactics of population control: 2 children per family, and you pay a fine for the second. And they have a state-monitored media and internet. There is no YouTube or Google in China. They have Bing and a state-created search engine. And there is China's ruler. Now quickly, the geographic distribution of power. Unitary government is a centralized government. A centralized government system in which lower levels of government have little power independent of the national government. We do not have a unitary government, in case you wanted to know. Federal government, a system of government in which power is divided by a constitution between a central government and regional governments. National government shares power with lower levels of government, such as states. We have a federalist system. We have a national government, a state governments, and local governments, and community, county and town levels. And then division of powers, it's the idea of separation of powers. This philosophy heavily influenced the writing of the United States Constitution. We have the three branches stated there, and they are kept in distinct order to prevent abuse of power. We also have a confederate government. We do not have one of those, but European Union does, and it's an alliance of independent states. Historically speaking, we've had them before. The U.S. under the Articles of Confederation and the Confederate States of America. And then, of course, presently, as already mentioned, we have the European Union as a modern-day example of what a confederate government would look like. Here's a map of the beloved EU. This little spot right here is actually Switzerland, and they do not participate in anything related to the EU. And Great Britain just voted to leave, so we'll see how that plays out later on this year. Quickly, the relationship between legislative and executive branches. We have the presidential system on one side and the parliamentary one on the other. The president features a separation of powers between the two branches, meaning between the legislative and the executive. Parliament, as the executive is made up of the prime minister or premier. Premier is usually the French, and that official's cabinet. The presidential government has both branches are independent of one another but are co-equal, while Parliament has voters electing the legislature, and then the chief executive is drawn from those already in the legislative branch. The United States invented this form of government, meaning we are the ones that have perfected the presidential government system. We have every 4 to 8 years we have a perfect swap between presidents. It baffles most of the world why we don't have a violent exchange of rulers. There is the presidential seal, and this is a picture of a parliament system in Southeast Asia. And then finally, here is a chart to help you understand the differences between the two systems. This was section 2 of chapter 1.